Next up, we have an amazing speaker and an amazing woman, Pam Ahern, the founder and director of Edgar's Mission. Pam built the sanctuary from the ground up and set in motion outreach programs that would bring farmed animals out of the dark unknown and into public view. She's done so much amazing work and is a wealth of knowledge. Please give a warm round of applause to Pam Ahern. There you go. You're welcome.
So much. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, thank you so much for having me, Adelaide. It's a joy to be back here, although the weather on the way over, I think you're trying to send me back to Victoria. But I'm here. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today on land traditionally held by the Kaurna people, and I do pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. James Somerset was around 8 years old when he was captured in Africa and taken to Virginia in America. He was purchased by the affluent Charles Stewart and taken to Boston for life as servitude as a slave. And that's exactly what he did for 25 years. However, in 1769, Stewart went to London and he took Somerset with him. In 1771, James Somerset had himself baptised, and in doing so, he earned 3 godparents. Not long thereafter, Somerset escaped, only to be captured 2 months later. Stewart was so enraged about the defiance of Somerset that he had him thrown into the Anne-Marie, where he was to be sent to Jamaica and was to be sold as a slave again, where conditions were even harsher than what poor old Somerset had endured. But he got lucky. His 3 custodians came forward, and they took a writ before the King's Court for habeas corpus, a writ that requires a person who is under arrest to be brought before a judge to secure the person's release unless lawful grounds can prove otherwise. And therein ensued much argument, whether Somerset should be declared a thing or a person. And this was one of the foundations of the abolition movement, a movement that commands us to consider not how one appears on the outside that matter, but who is on the inside. A movement that says we're not separated by our differences, but united by our similarities. The trial was presided over by Lord Mansfield, and it was to last 7 long months, and even that was groundbreaking at the time. It included many, many noteworthy happenings, none the least when Lord Mansfield, who himself had slaves, and he preempted his historic final decision when he said, "Let justice prevail, or the heavens may fall." And Somerset went on to be granted a free man and a person. Let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. They're really profound words that would have taken an enormous amount of courage and compassion to utter at the time, because it was unheard of that a person of dark-coloured skin would ever be considered a person in charge of their own destiny. And I'm sure at the time, people whose skin was dark in colour thought things were never, ever going to change, that it was never, ever going to get any better. But it did. When I was just 10 years old, I had my own Lord Mansfield moment. Despite my tender age, my love of animals was already legendary. And a tiny little turtle had washed up in the debris of a swollen creek. The captor of this turtle knew of my penchant at the time for naming everything Freddie. Thankfully, that's something that I've grown out of. All the other animals at Edgar's Mission would be pretty boring if they're all called Freddie. They emblazoned on the back of Freddie the letters, Freddie, in white paint. And they presented me with this little turtle. And I was so incredibly excited. I thought of all the cool things that I could do with Freddie, like take him to school and dance classes, dress him up in doll's clothes that I could never find a doll worthy of wearing. I raced to the library and learned all I could about turtles. Like the top of their shell is called the carapace, and the bottom is the plastoon. And that shell on the top of their back is made up of 60 different bones, all connected. And the turtles have danced on this planet for over 200 million years. That means they even predate mammals and birds. But most of all, I learned that turtles love to be turtles. And they like to hang out with their own kind. And that didn't include little girls. So back to that not-so-swollen river I went. I kissed Freddie on his craggy little neck one last time. And I granted him his turtlehood. And off he went. But alas, I still went on to collect bugs. I went to circuses with exotic animals and visited aquariums with majestic sea animals that had their liberty traded for our fleeting moments of joy. I ogled at animals in barren zoos. I'm not sure at the exact time in my life it changed. It did change. And I take great heart knowing that the idea is gaining currency every day and that we as a society are being guided by compassion, science, and common sense to the irrefutable fact that we are not alone on this planet with others who have the same desire to have a life of joy, meaning, and purpose. John Hargrove, in his New York Times best-selling book, Beneath the Surface, he weaves a tale of heartache and hope. We learn about this wide-eyed 10-year-old boy who was taken to SeaWorld. And John watched in wide-eyed wonder the trainers of the orcas and the dolphins. He decided then and there that's exactly what he wanted to do with his life. He studied long and hard. He took in marine biology. He repeatedly went to SeaWorld to try and get a job, and eventually he did. And he did become a SeaWorld trainer. But his fascination was to turn to fury when he came to see those sea animals living lives not that different from the incarcerated animals in zoos. They were so different, though, from the wild cousins of the orcas and dolphins who had so much area to swim about in the ocean and explore it every day. He went on to championing the cause of orcas and whales and debunk so many of those myths that SeaWorld perpetrate every day. I recall with great exhilaration the day I got a call from a battery hen farmer. He was very nervous at first. He wouldn't even tell me his name. I had to meet him at a secret location. You see, this battery hen farmer was walking through his sheds one day, and he stopped momentarily and he looked into the eyes of one of the hens before him. And there, for the first time in his life, he saw before him not a production machine, but a living, breathing, feeling animal who deserved nothing of what he afforded her. And he decided then and there that he wanted to exit the industry. He no longer wanted to make his money off these beautiful birds, but he couldn't do so until every one of those birds has found sanctuary. And so one by one, we gently lifted those birds from the cage and took them to Edgar's mission. And that rescue had a profound effect on all those who was involved in the rescue. It was actually quite distressing for some people. They couldn't actually go back into the sheds because they were so disturbed because of the sight they'd seen. When you see these animals firsthand and you realise the lives that we humans have imposed upon them, it really does get you here and not here. I remember one of the times we're actually lifting the hens out and we're putting them in our straw-lined vehicles. And we're being very, very gentle with these birds because we loved them dearly and we knew they'd gone through so much. And we're putting the birds down. I said, guys, the birds are sort of wobbling back and forth. I said, guys, you've got to be more gentle with the birds. They go, we are, Pam, we are. And then we realised, for the first time in these birds' life, they were actually standing on a flat surface. See, in those battery hen cages, they're all tilted, so the eggs will just roll to the front of the cage and they can be collected on machines. That's how the birds had spent their life. They couldn't even stand on a flat surface. You know, I truly believe that the pages of history are going to be filled with more and more people having epiphanies such as Lord Mansfield, John Hargrove, and the battery hen farmer. As more and more people come to realise that humanity's relationship with the animal kingdom is fractured, and they're seeing their own complicity in it. But the good news is that this relationship can be healed with love, kindness, and a hell of a lot of courage. I'm not alone in my belief in the goodness of the human heart and that we as a species are programmed to care. It's what ensured we have got where we are today. We hear stories every day of the week of people who have come across terrible acts of animal cruelty. Right now, I'm sure each and every one of you is outraged at those terrible images we've seen of beautiful racehorses butchered and slaughtered at abattoirs around the country. We know we can do better. And I look around here today and I see so many stalls. Years ago, something like this wouldn't have happened. Years ago, I would have been rolling down those hills into Adelaide and heading onto the agricultural grounds behind us with my horses to compete at an agricultural event. Things can change. Not long ago, we undertook a rescue at Edgar's Mission that saw us arrive back very, very late and weary and tired at night. And in the moonlight, I could see the light shining on the gates, the big black gates at our sanctuary. And I could just make out the name of the old name of that property. It used to be a thoroughbred breeding facility. And it just reminded me in that moment that things really do change. See, beyond those gates, years ago, thoroughbreds were there, and none of them could have ended up in those abattoirs where we saw those horses. They were exploited for what those horses could produce, not the beautiful individuals that they are. Things can change. It's one of my greatest reasons for hope. And our sanctuary is not alone in being a voice for animals. I give thanks to all those kind hearts out there who have opened their hearts and homes to rescued animals. I take great heart that there are so many farm animal sanctuaries around the country. When we started, there was hardly any. And I take the greatest heart that we are sitting on the right side of history, and every day that we are writing new narratives with every action that we take. For me, it was to be exchanging my successful equestrian career, something that I honestly thought I would never ever do. I read the story of John Hargrave, and I think it pretty much mirrors exactly what mine was. When I saw a horse, I wanted one of my very own. And I wasn't allowed to have one for many, many years. Yet I did get to have a horse and became an equestrian beyond anything I could ever have possibly imagined. But I now know today that it was just a stepping stone to where I am. I've learned many other things along that trajectory, none the least that we can change. I've learned that we should never judge. But most importantly, I've learned that we are here to serve. And the greatest gift that we can give to the world is our kindness. Not only have I become the founder and director of Edgar's Mission, but I am fulfilling my promise to every single animal that I haven't been able to save, to the animals who will never ever know kindness. And that is, I will tell your story. I've become a storyteller. And in that vein, I would like to tell you the story about the beautiful Clarabelle and Valentine here. These beautiful animals live at Edgar's Mission, although little Valentine's a lot bigger today. Over the years, we've rescued many, many bobby calves, and many people are touched by the plight of bobby calves with their big doe eyes and tragically been ripped from their mothers. People open their hearts and homes to these little baby animals. And I always thought, what about these mother cows? We forget to get them, they're big animals, and they get sent off to slaughter when they're no longer productive. And I wanted to save one of these animals, and I befriended someone in the dairy industry. And I said, look, if ever an opportunity comes up to save a mama cow, please, I would really love to save it. And several years ago, the opportunity came up. There were 2 cows I could choose to save. This little girl here, I named her Clarabelle, and there was a big Frisian. Her name was Daphne. And my task was to choose which animal I would save. And it's one of the most terrible choices that you have to make, knowing that which one you would save would get to live and which one you couldn't take would not get to live. And so I chose both of them, and they got to live at Edgar's Mission. But most importantly, these mama cows were pregnant. Daphne, as I mentioned, was this big Frisian. She was one of the biggest cows I'd ever seen. She was a giant, but she was so incredibly kind. And she gave birth to her baby on Australia Day. And the baby wasn't called Freddie, he was called Ozzy. And the day Ozzy was born, the volunteers called, Clara, Daphne's giving birth. Come on, Daphne's giving birth. So we got the blankets there, and we got the hot water, and we're going out to the cigars and had the cigars smoke while she had the baby. That's what you do. And as soon as we took one step into that paddock, she's morphed from the most gentle cow you've ever met to the Godzilla of cows. There was no doubt that she was going to kill us. And we all know the reason why. Because she thought that her baby was about to be taken away, as every one of her babies had done before. So we took a step back, we got the long lenses, and we took lots of photos. Then this little miss, well, she was to give birth late February. And she, like me, loves her food. She was always first up for her food. But she was starting to get a bit slow coming up for her food. And we thought, well, she's having a big baby in there, she's a little bit slow doing that. And then I noticed just one teat was engorged. And I thought, hello. And I followed her back to our forest. And there in the forest was the beautiful little Valentine, blinking wide-eyed in wonder at me. Whoa, come back. Not your cue. And there she was, blinking at me. And I realised that she was not a newborn calf. that she'd been on this world for several days before. Her umbilical was was dry, and when these little bubbas are born, they have these little capsules that cover their hoofs so they can passage out through the mother's birth canal and not cause damage. They were well worn. She'd been walking on this earth for several days. And we thought, this is incredible. We have to do a story about this, how this mama cow has hid her baby in the forest. And so we came out to do the photography there, and Kylie does all the videos at the sanctuary. He was videoing me looking for the calf, and he said, look, come on, Pam, look, I've got enough footage now. Just go and find the calf. And I said, well, actually, I can't find it. Someone has taken this baby calf. And we were horrified. And before we called the police, we thought, do one more forensic sweep of the paddock. And we did. We all formed this big line. We walked down the paddock, and there in this tiny stand of dead cypress trees was this little baby calf blinking at us. Clarabelle had got sick of us going into the forest every day because she was worried that that baby was going to be taken away from her, as every single baby had been taken before. After that, we said, look, we'll just leave Mama and Bub to be. A few weeks later, Clarabelle did bring the baby up for food time. She knew the baby was safe. There's barely a human who's ever heard that story and has not been moved to reconsider our relationship with these beautiful animals. We humans so often like to think we are apart from the animal kingdom, yet we are so intrinsically linked to the animal kingdom. We have company. They are others, yet we are the same. They move in manners different to ours. They tread, swim, fly upon this same soil as we do. They drink the same water as we do. They breathe the same air as we do. They have the same need for food and nourishment as we do. They speak in language many of us do not understand, yet they communicate in ways that we have lost or will never attain the ability to do so. We confine and exploit them in so many ways, yet they still seek to explore their world and find joy in pretty much the same way we do, but far less impact. We separate them from their families and loved ones, yet they form strong bonds just like we do. We enact legislation around them, and it's always geared to our interests, not theirs. We herd them into vehicles and transport them miles from their homes, yet they have the same desire for a life, again, far simpler than ours. We incarcerate and harm them, yet they yearn to live. We take just about everything away from them, and when there is nothing to take, we take their lives, yet they still yearn to live. They are, in the words of Carl Safina, kin in another skin. They are the non-human animals, and we are their flood. As I mentioned earlier, there are so many reasons for hope. And here's my final one. It came about several years ago in a high court in America, when the judge was handing down a decision to yet another one of Stephen Weyer's attempts at having personhood achieved for a chimpanzee. She concluded with these words, and they are words that he'd heard so many times before at similar trials, that the court was not prepared to entertain the case. But that was not the last of her words. She had two more to add. For now, our greatest reason for hope, that the flood is about to end, and the heavens may well fall, because our current treatment of animals is only so for now. Change is upon us in so many glorious and delicious ways. I'd like to end with words of Rundhati Roy. She says it best. When another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. So can I. I really hope you can do too. Thank you so much. So I think we might have a few more minutes, James. So anyone's got any questions? Hopefully I'll know the answers.
Questions? Anyone? Just put your hand up. I'll come over to you. Anybody? Comments, questions, anything you want to share? That's kind of good, because earlier someone would be question over here, question over there, and I was doing laps. Getting fit today. Anybody? Anything you want to share, or any questions you want to ask? Anything like that? Anything else you want to add that
Haven't covered?
Yeah, maybe something that you maybe skipped over a bit more than usual, or anything like that. Oh, there's a girl right here. Here we go. You ready? Do you want to ask me and I'll say them? Or do you want to say them? How old's Ruby, Pam?
Ruby, if anyone knows of Edgar's Mission, you know the beautiful vet nurse Ruby. Yeah, people are nodding their heads. Actually, Ruby's quite more famous than me. Often when people come to visit the sanctuary, Ruby is always by my side. And they go, oh, Ruby! They're so excited. Ruby, can I have my phone and take it with you? Ruby's coming up to 11 years old, and thank you for asking. She's, how old are you?
8.
8. Oh, well, when you get to Ruby's age, you can have some more teeth. One of the beautiful things about Ruby's stories and all of the animals who live at Edgar's Mission, each and every one of them has a story. And we do tell their stories. And they are so diverse and so different. But every single one of those stories is linked by one theme. And that is the goodness of the human heart. Someone has seen these animals in trouble. And they've realised what they choose to do next will determine whether that animal lived or died. And as I said before, that is my greatest reason for hope. That people do want to help animals, that we are programmed to care. The greatest tragedy for farmed animals, and they represent the largest number of animals in human care, is that we don't see their suffering. We don't see their pain and anguish. We only see the results of what has come from them after we humans have turned them into the commodities that we think that they are. One of the things when I'm talking about these animals, I actually refer to them as farmed animals, not farm animals. So I put an ED on the end. And the reason I do that, if we call them farm animals, to me, and I used to say it years and years when I started the sanctuary, I used to call them farm animals because that's what they are, farm animals. Well, they're not. They are animals. We humans have farmed them. That's what we've done to them. When we label them as farm animals, it actually takes away any thought that we need to question what we're doing to these animals. And I think we really do need to start to question what we are doing to these animals and ask ourselves as individuals, is that right? Is that just and fair? Like me when I was growing up, I cared deeply about animals. I was so passionate about them. Like little Freddie, I thought it'd be really cool to have a turtle, but it might have been really cool for a turtle to have a human. And I think when we can put others above our own self-interest, I think then we rise to be the best that we humans can possibly ever become.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Pam. Anybody else have any questions that they're curious about? Yep.
Hello. In a vegan world, in an ideal vegan world, does this render domestic dogs and cats obsolete? What do they eat?
That's a great question. I think there might be two questions about domestic animals and what do they eat. And it's a really great question. And we often get these questions, tossed at us to suddenly find all the answers. And I don't have the answers. I'm the first to say that I don't have the answers. And I don't think it's even incumbent upon me to have them. I think it's a society we need to decide these things about how we are going to live. I think humanity will always have a relationship with the animal kingdom. We are a part of it. And I think we have these symbiotic relationship with animals where they can benefit from it as well. We're starting to look at these things about, do we even de-sex cats and dogs? Are we right to actually do this to these animals, like controlling their breeding? And these are really valid questions we can have. And as you raise, well, what should we be feeding them? And that's a really, really important question because I heard someone saying the other day, if all the cats and dogs of the world got together, they'd make them one of the 5th biggest nations of the world. And they're eating these farmed animals that I am championing the cause of today. The great news is that change is on its way, and the Beyond Meat and all these new meat proteins that are coming out, that we will be able to feed these animals without slaughtering other animals as well. There are lots of great vegan cat and dog foods out there now. I think dogs can quite easily live vegan lifestyles. I think the science is there to create vegan cat food, but you try talking ethics to a cat and they'll say, pass me the endangered tuna. But I think change is certainly happening, and we're actually starting to think about these things. Years ago it would never even been considered to have vegan diets for cats and dogs. I remember the first vegan dog food I got, it came out from America, and there was no way known our dogs would eat it. Now they readily do. And it's just so exciting, the change that's happening. And just on that note, last week I was at a veterinary conference in Sydney, and this was just all vets getting together, talking about veterinary science and animals. And the overarching theme that came through just about every single presentation was a need for be looking at moving away from animal-based protein to feed a nation because of animal cruelty. I sat next to a vet from America, and he said it's incumbent on vets to now get out there and start championing the cause of animals and not aligning with interests of industries. And I think that happens to a lot with farmed animals. Vets know that a lot of the treatment of farmed animals and what we're doing to them, the way we incarcerate them, even the way we castrate them, is not aligned with good animal welfare, but because they're so beholden to industry that they're not game to move away from that. But change is happening. Change is really happening. I know it's really frustrating. It's not quick enough, but I think the only way that we're going to get there is through kindness.
Thank you, Pam.